In 1962, the United States military gave a psychologist a Pentagon office and a budget. The psychologist used that access to push a plan that sounded like a joke. A world where computers talked to each other, where strangers shared information instantly, where work, libraries, and conversation lived inside screens. It sounds fake because it should have been stopped by the first adult in the room. It was not. Most people believed the internet was built by a small group of engineers who were clearly aiming at the same destination. That story feels comforting. It has order. It has intentions. Reality is messier. Reality is a chain of people trying to solve narrow problems, then accidentally creating the background music of modern life. The man at the center of this episode was named Joseph Carl Robert Licklider. Most people called him J.C.R. Licklider. Many colleagues called him Lick. Licklider was born on March 11, 1915, in St. Louis, Missouri. Licklider started in psychology and psychoacoustics. Human hearing, human perception, how brains handle signals, which means the future was built in part by someone trained to study why people mishear things. Dry irony, very on brand for our species. In March 1960, Licklider published an idea with a blunt name: man-computer symbiosis. The argument was simple and unsettling. Computers should not be treated like fast calculators. Computers should become partners in thinking. Close partners. Not in the distant future. In the working lifetime of the people reading the paper. Licklider described a world where a person sat at a display, interacted in real time, and used the machine for planning, exploring, and deciding. Not just for printing answers. Here is the first myth to correct. Myth versus reality. People assume interactive computing began as a luxury for hobbyists. It did not. Interactive computing was pursued because decision makers wanted speed. Scientists wanted collaboration. Operators wanted control of complex systems without waiting hours for batch jobs. And that demand produced a strange outcome. It made conversation with a machine feel normal. Then Licklider took an unusual path. In 1957, Licklider went to a company called Bolt Beranek and Newman, BBN. BBN did serious work. Acoustics, engineering psychology, military contracts. The kind of place where a memo could turn into a machine. By October 1962, Licklider moved again. This time, into the Pentagon system. The office was called the Information Processing Techniques Office.IP2, under ARPA, later called DARPA. Licklider was not hired to invent the internet. Licklider was hired to reshape how the military handled information and command decisions. But Licklider looked at that mission and saw something larger. If computers were going to support thinking, computers needed to be shared. Computers needed to be reachable. Computers needed to talk to each other. Licklider had a habit of writing like the future was a practical to-do list, not a fantasy. In 1963, a memo circulated with a ridiculous address line. It was sent to members and affiliates of the Intergalactic Computer Network. That phrase is famous now because it sounds like a science fiction parody. But the ambition underneath was very sober. A network of time-sharing systems. Multiple universities. Multiple research groups. Linked so people could use programs and data cross-distance. Licklider did not just talk. Licklider funded. Licklider pushed money toward time-sharing, toward new computer science groups, toward interactive systems. Licklider backed researchers building tools that looked useless to anyone who had never tried them. A mouse, on-screen windows, hypertext, shared computing. Here's the second myth to correct. Myth versus reality. People assume the internet began as a single invention event. Reality is a set of funded ecosystems. Licklider acted less like an inventor and more like a gardener with government money. Now we reach the sounds fake moment. A psychologist sitting inside the Pentagon system pushed a concept that required different machines in different cities run by different people to behave like one shared environment. Not one computer, many computers, one experience. This required something that did not exist yet at scale: a wide area packet switch network. In 1966, another ARPA manager, Robert Taylor, asked for money to connect the expensive ARPA-funded machines so researchers could stop traveling just to use them. The request was around $1 million. By 1967 and 1968, the planning hardened. The contracts came. The interfaces were defined. Then 1969 arrived. On September 2, 1969, the first ARPANET node went in at UCLA. On October 29, 1969, around 10:30 p.m. Pacific Time, a UCLA student programmer named Charlie Klein tried to log into a computer at the Stanford Research Institute. SRI? Klein typed O. Klein typed O. Then the system crashed. So the first famous message of this network age was not hello. It was lol. History has an excellent sense of timing. Humans do not. At this point, many people reach for a popular explanation. The nuclear war story. You have heard it. The internet was built to survive a Soviet attack, so it could root around destruction. This is the third myth to correct. Myth versus reality. ARPANET was not built as a doomsday communication system. The primary motivation was resource sharing, connecting scarce, expensive computers, letting researchers use software and data without duplication. Yes, resilience mattered in the larger Cold War atmosphere, and packet switching produced self-healing properties. But the core push was practical. People wanted to use each other's machines. So, why does Licklider get called the man who built the future, even though Licklider did not personally solder the network into existence? Because Licklider built the conditions. Licklider created a culture where interactive computing was normal, where time sharing was worth paying for, where networking was an obvious next step. Licklider also insisted the point was not machines. The point was people using machines to think together. A colleague later paraphrased Licklider's message as something like this: the goal was a society where knowledge moved faster than bureaucracy. That idea sounds dangerously optimistic, which is how you know it came from a person who had not yet seen comment sections. The aftermath is where the joke becomes permanent architecture. By December 5, 1969, the early network linked for sites: UCLA SRI, UC Santa Barbara, and the University of Utah. In 1971, network email appeared and spread quickly. In 1973, international connections began to appear. In 1974, the idea of a more universal protocol suite was formalized, and the long transition toward TCP and IP began. On January 1, 1983, ARPANET switched to TCP and IP, a date many people treat as a modern internet birthday. In 1990, ARPANET itself shut down, having outlived its experimental purpose. And Licklider died on June 26, 1990, in Arlington, Massachusetts. Which means Licklider lived long enough to see the network idea become real and to watch computers move closer to ordinary humans. Licklider did not live long enough to see pocket computers, or algorithmic feeds, or the day a refrigerator could have opinions, possibly a mercy. So here is the irony. The future was not built by a single genius in a dramatic moment. The future was built by a person who understood incentives, human attention, and systems. A psychologist, Licklider did not just imagine machines. Licklider imagined habits, workflows, collaboration, the everyday rituals that make technology stop feeling like technology. The strange part is not that a network was created. The strange part is that it still works as well as it does, considering it was born from memos, academic ambition, military funding, and a first message that crashed after 2 letters. Low was an accident. Everything after low was a choice. And humans, against the evidence, occasionally make those. The future often begins not with a bang, but with a memo. It's worth reading the fine print.